You know what? This song is so prophetic. The wheels do indeed keep turning. Yeah. Good morning, everybody. I'm Babz Rawls-Ivy, and you are tuned in to LoveBabz, LoveTalk on Zoom. Thank you, Harry Droles. So Enroue is back. I know y'all love him. You love him. You love him because everywhere I go, you stop me on the street about it. So he is back, and we are talking the Orishas and all the wonderful things that we have learned thus far.
Mm.
How are you? Do you want to open with a prayer?
Yeah, you know, I like this song that we've been doing. So again, it's an ancestor song, thanking them for the ashe that they have passed on to us, right? For the gifts that we have, for the ability that we have, the skills, the affinities that we have. And we thank them for that and that we're using it today. So we honor our male lineage, our female lineage, and all of our ancestral lineage for these things. Iba ba ba tofu washe o. Iba ba ba tofu washe. Iba ba ba tofu washe o. Iba ba ba tofu washe. Ashe te fu wanando you. Iba ba ba tofu washe. Iba ye ye tofu washe o. Iba ye ye tofu washe. Iba ye ye tofu washe o. Ayeye tofu ashe, ashe te fu wanando you. Ayeye tofu ashe. Iba egun tofu ashe o. Iba egun tofu ashe. Iba egun tofu ashe o. Iba egun tofu ashe, ashe te fu wanando you. Iba egun tofu ashe. Iba egun tofu ashe. Baigun tofu ashe. Baigun tofu ashe. Ashe.
Ashe. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? This is a very holy time for the Abrahamic religion. So that felt very, very, very peaceful and very at home. So thank you for that. So how you doing? How are we doing? What are we talking about today?
Well, I mean, there was some things in my mind, but then also just like honoring what you're saying, right? So this, right, we have like the wheels keep turning, right? These cycles, like life is actually still occurring, right? We have spring, right? This resurgence and renewal of life, right? This renewed expression, right? So life is still happening, but now we have like the shoots that have been coming up, the flowers that have been coming up. The new growth, nesting of birds, there's new life happening, being born, re-emerging. There's also Passover in Judaism, right? This remembrance of being enslaved and then liberation. And it's Easter, also this resurrection, this renewal of life. Ramadan, or this connection, and how do we continue to consecrate this relationship with God? How do we kind of hone that relationship? I also had my birthday beginning of April, and my kids' birthdays. We just finished. Mother's Day is coming up.
And my birthday is Saturday.
Your birthday is Saturday. Wonderful, happy birthday! Yay for the spring birthdays. And so, you know, in this ancestor song, all in the midst of a global pandemic and the circumstances surrounding it. And the thing that speaks to me today and in these times is like, this is all life. And the pain and the suffering that's here, while louder today than it was 3 months ago, is in some ways the same. And what's been helpful for me, and with a lot of people I'm in contact with, whether I'm working with them or not, is how to remain connected to that, how to remain connected to life with a capital L, so that we don't drown in the circumstances of what we're currently experiencing. whether it's about the virus itself or about the circumstances and the systems that are failing louder than the way they were failing before. And that piece around connectivity, even in this physical distancing, is even more relevant and important. So that we can continue to kind of find our way and to live in a way that is sustainable and has the depth and meaning that it still had 2 months ago, which was still even challenging then for many people to feel connected to. So because the pressures and everything is turned up, those things are strained even more. And so I see this like range of how people are coping, and there is a huge range, right? We're on the same planet and we're experiencing our lives in very different ways based on all kinds of things in terms of this pandemic, in terms of where we're located, resources we have, health that we have or don't have, communities we have or don't have. And life is still a precious thing, an opportunity we have. And so how even in the midst of this, can we have the capacity to remain connected to that? And sometimes it's choice, and I want to pay attention to this or that. And sometimes people are just in an overwhelm and are experiencing trauma in this. But it is not like the same experience for everybody. Like everybody is actually not traumatized right now. And so that in the expanse and the breadth of like this living experience is challenging. How do we find our way? How do we connect? How do we recover from the overwhelm? How do we find a new way of being sustainable as everything is amped up and everything is this crisis and everything has to be solved? We got to fix this thing all the time. And the kind of rushing that can happen. And, again, not to minimize suffering and pain that people are feeling at all. And there are also people who are, there's a client who I have who is probably experiencing about 70% less anxiety than she usually experiences because work is a really toxic place to be in. So because she can work from home, right, that is kind of off her shoulders, and she can actually deal with some much more kind of life things that were in the way because she doesn't have to deal with the work piece, which is so stressful.
Amazing how something like a pandemic can yield so many silver linings.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like people, so many silver linings for people. I don't want to say unintended. I just think this thing brings up for a lot of people a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And it made a way for a lot of different people to be and choose and live a different kind of way.
Yeah.
Some out of their wildest dreams and some out of necessity.
Right. And we're really confronted with ourselves in a different way.
Yes.
Somebody was passing by on the sidewalk, and I was like, "Oh, like how are you doing today?" Just like checking in. And he was like, "Oh, I'm so bored," and we kind of laughed and went on. And then I had a moment, and I don't know the reality of what his life is, but for many people, the notion of living, is wrapped up in kind of popular culture. Well, I go to work, I do the thing there, and then I come home, and then I like tune out in the various ways, and I'm not really paying attention to my health and well-being in a certain way. I'm not really looking deeply into myself. Just like I just got to hit these markers, and that shows that I'm living a successful life. Now, without those things, right, this person's left to themselves. Yeah. And their experience of being with themselves was they were bored, which doesn't to me say that like they are a boring person, but actually has more to do with a difficulty being with themselves and a desire to avoid that. Like all the things I'm doing that I used to avoid myself, like I'm kind of tired of, like they're not doing the same thing. Mm-hmm. They're not keeping me from these strong feelings. And I think that that's an important piece of like, and this is also an opportunity to, how can we really navigate the feelings we have differently? How can we be with ourselves, not figure it out, not solve it, because there's things we can't figure out, we can't solve. And so how do we allow ourselves to feel what we're feeling the anger, feeling the boredom, like feel the boredom, fine, feel it. Feel the grief, feel the rage, feel the fear, not to get lost in it and like, oh, I'm really feeling this and I'm gonna like perpetuate it on and on, but allow it to be present. Where is it in your body? In the shoulders and the neck and the chest and the stomach and the legs and the arms and the eyebrows and the jaw.
Yeah.
And notice that it's there. Like, oh, I'm really like balled up, tensed in a ball. Oh, let me at least notice that that is what is happening. Like that's a better step than being lost in it. So that all is pretty alive for me right now, and kind of seeing so many differences of how people are living, right? How people are coping in these times, how people are managing. Some people are just holding on. Some people are super connected and are really creative in reaching out and helping people and supporting people in other ways, in ways that they hadn't imagined or allowed themselves to do before. And they're up there in the same way, right? Some people are kind of running themselves ragged, even more so than the way they used to run themselves ragged before. Like if I can do one more thing, then I'll solve it, right? And you know, people's health is, you know, there's the like in a moment of crisis, right? We kind of push through things, but if that moment of crisis and pushing through becomes the new normal, that's actually going to lead to a lot of problems and a lot of increased suffering, less productivity. Also, I mean, it's not about productivity, but we're actually not as skillful. But then our life suffers. Our ability and capacity to be present, even with the people and the things that we care so deeply around, suffers. And I think that that's an important aspect to pay attention to. I once had a conversation with my dad about, so he was in the Panther Party and the Communist Party, you know, in the throes of all the things and all the undoing oppression, creating liberation, you know, as front lines, as we talk about front lines, right? Which I don't love the term, but like I'll use it for now. And I asked him, I said, so what did it feel like during those times? You know, what was the, you know, because there's the like the doing, right? I have to do this, I'm doing this organizing, right? Connecting with these people. I said, what did it feel like? And he said, so imagine you're at the start of a race, right? And the starter has the starting gun, and they're like, okay, take your mark, get set. And he said, that's what it felt like. That moment between the get set and the go. And
wow.
And like, you can't, that's not sustainable. You can't live that way.
I'm like, you had me all hyped up, and I was like,
right. And that's the space that people are in now. Many people are in now. And so there's just a I think I feel there's a softening that can happen for me. Like I really want those people in that space who really have a desire to help so many people, right? The helpers nowadays, to recognize that they're in that place and to also take care of themselves in that place. Because you can't live, and we're not designed as a human species to live in that place. We can like visit that place for a period of time and then come out of that place, but the longer we're in it in that way, our system starts to break down. And I think, as I've talked before, there's an invitation of can we do this help, this liberation, this justice, this transformational, this healing work different, as sustainable? We have all these models for like working ourselves to death, voluntarily and involuntarily. Like,
yes.
Why? Like, who does that serve, really? Because it doesn't mean that, like, I mean, if it was really true that, like, oh, if I work myself to death, then it's done, right? Then the liberation happens for everybody. Like, well, that hasn't happened. And that means something different for everybody. You know, I don't want to minimize people's commitment to what they value. But can we be in it? Can we be in this life also? Right? Can we honor this opportunity and be in it in a way that is also sustainable?
So what do you think some of the real lessons of this pandemic, besides illuminating the disparities in health, beside illuminating the disparity in wealth and those kinds of things, everybody has to sort of reckon with this moment in their own lives. There are some things about this pandemic you can't buy your way out of. Like if you have kids and you're used to having an au pair or a nanny, and for some reason they cannot come, there's no money that can get you one. You know, if you are someone who is running pillar to post, and all those things are removed, and now you, as you were talking about before, now you have to sit with yourself. Now you have to like be with yourself.
Yeah.
You know, all these revelations that people are having about their lives. And what I find interesting, Enroue, is that some of these things, these were unspoken prayers for people, you know, to be able to do just what they're doing. And it feels odd and strange and weird wrapped in this pandemic. But once you sift away that, some prayers have been answered for people around how to shift their lives, how to deliberately change their lives.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, so yes to all of that. And will people's desire, because there's a push for it, right? There's a real systemic push to return to normal.
Yeah.
Whatever. The way they were, right? With the veneer all back on, right? We're gonna paint over the cracks. We'll put a nice jacket on it, right? To get back to that. Because change and uncertainty, I mean, it's change and uncertainty is disruptive anyway, right? Even for good, right? It's a good thing that's happening. The change and uncertainty that it touches can be really disruptive. And our culture is fundamentally based on, let's do everything possible to avoid that and to create some things that appear timeless, or that will erase time, right? So what are all the products to make people look within a certain age range? How can we avoid things to the extent so we're not dealing with the feelings that come up with change and uncertainty, which there's nothing wrong with those things, but they can be uncomfortable. And so then there's all these ways to manage that discomfort. So for many people, there's going to be such a pull to return to that avoidance, right? The person who's like, I'm so bored. It's like, oh, great, things are back. I get to like kind of return to this, not so looking at myself in the mirror all the time. I want to avoid that, right? So there's actually going to be a really big pulse, sucking sound back into that. Yes, money can't buy, for some people, their way out of certain things, right? Which has kind of always been true. Like, life is still life. There's still still suffering that happens. There's still illness that happens, right? And it is very clear that the disparities that we have, again, are louder, right? They're not new ones. They're like the same ones that have been there, and they're like super extremely loud. Like, you're poorer and a person of color, you'll be suffering more. You'll be experiencing more pain from this than someone who is affluent and can have the 6 degrees of separation from kind of masses of people who may be have this virus or not, right? So if there's a frame of like someone getting sick because of a virus and who's more at risk because of a whole range of things, and then there's also the like circumstances that are protection of people still having very comfortable lives and isolating themselves and, filling a warehouse full of supplies so that they don't have to go deal with people in that way. So I think there's an aspect that I pay attention, like that kind of reactivity is also going to be there in just the same extent that there are also people who are like, oh, I really don't need so much. Oh, I really enjoy talking to people and connecting with people in my life who I have not connected with in years, in simple ways. Like, oh, this matters, right? This is feeding me in a different way. My life has shifted in a different way. What I've bought into about what a good life is the having, and I do this and do that. And like, wow, I don't have those things. And like, they're still good, right? There are days of joy, even in the midst of this. And so that, I think there's going to be that kind of, that split is also going to be louder. I was remembering, right in the midst of September 11th, the president was like, let's go back shopping. We'll show them that they can't defeat us. Like the shopping was the answer to grief and fear. And so like we have a well-oiled machine of a system to do that.
Yeah.
Let's back to, not to minimize now, what's happened in the economy and people really in pain because of that. And there are less overt creative ways of how do we do both, right? How do we ensure safety and get people working and money so they're not devastated by poverty? And those actually filter more into system issues than how do I as an individual cope with these circumstances. So there's this there's the silver lining. There's always been, again, right? There's, oppression and suffering and pain is a part of existence. And, as various people, or people of African descent, indigenous descent, and all kinds of people who've gone through kind of cultural sufferings, right, have still lived, right? There are people who've been war-torn countries who still love and raise children and connect and find joy and creativity in the midst of that. And so this is also what is happening now. And so there's the desire that I personally have, yes, it'd be so beautiful for people to kind of have this opportunity to find a renewed aspect of wow, meaning and purpose and life in the midst of all this. And there's going to be a lot of return to the mess that we've been in this country for a long time.
Yeah, because you notice the things that they want to get back to. We want to open businesses, and that i.e. means retail spaces, and people get shopping and buy these things so that you could feel better. And I don't think I'm making a judgment or whatever. I think what I'm suggesting is we do those things in lieu of being with ourselves, being alone with ourselves, and following those feelings to wherever they may take us, whatever they pull up for us.
Right. Yeah. Well, even looking at structurally, so there used to be community spaces where people would go and be together. Right? And those were people, there wasn't so much technology. And so people had to physically come together and be in these communal spaces. And those communal spaces have become corporate privatized spaces, right? You go to the cafe, not just to have the thing there, but to meet people, to be with people, and to work with people, and to see community, and to reconnect, right? So, but that without the commercial space, the privatized space, kind of don't know what to do. We don't have the cultural norms so much of just being in these spaces together. And so even now with the physical distancing, because the privatized places are closed, well, okay, I guess we can't, what's the point of going anywhere? I can't go to the mall. I can't go to the cafe. I can't go to the store. I can't go downtown to shop, to hang out there and where I would see people. Can't go, to places of worship. And so the what do we do even if we're being safe around physical distancing, I'm just going to be in the house and I don't know, and consume there, right? Consume more food and consume more, technology, and consume more alcohol, consume more sex, and consume more of the things, and not as just like I want to do those things, but also as I can't be with what's happening in my life. So those things become ways to fill time and to get at satisfying something. I can satisfy some urge, even though I can't satisfy some other urges. And so that's all part of the, let's get back to these things, right? There's always this underlying story of like, so if we get back to the shopping, who is really benefiting, right? Who is not just because you look at like how the small business monies have gone out, and like the vast majority of these things going to companies that make tons and tons of money, not to the local places that if they close will not reopen. Mm-hmm. Or there's a very strong likelihood they won't be reopening. But like the corporate place, like they might close that location, and then boom, money starts churning in, and then like, oh, then we'll put another one up, right? Or they're not disappearing because of this. And so you also see like where is that let's get it back to normal for who and for what, and kind of who's the normal what's the normal we're trying to get back to. And so there's a hope, the kind of, I don't know, cautious optimism. I don't know what the right frame would be, but like, can there be that new way, the new normal that we find ourselves to, that touched something that was dormant, or that touched something that got like a little bit more attention during this pandemic? Can that be a part of this return of connectivity, of joy, of creativity, of wholeness, of wellness, like those things as well?
I think for some people, Enroue, I think that will happen, or it is happening.
Yes.
I think for some people.
Yeah.
Will it be masses? I don't know about the masses, mm-hmm. Considering that I'm seeing people protesting, staying at home now. They're ready to get out. They're ready to get out of their houses, take to the streets. Right. I think people will take to the streets for.
Yeah. Yes. Right. Exactly. What are people willing to put their bodies on the line for? Right. To kind of, I'm going to be loud. I'm going to get out of my comfort zone. I really need this to happen. And again, there's this complexity in that, in people's livelihoods, and what that impact of wealth and poverty is going to have on folks. Yet there's not that complex conversation.
Right. So another thing that this pandemic has illuminated for people, because I've been paying attention to this, because you and I have talked about this too, is the levels of which people are very lonely in this age of all these so-called connecting things, that people are increasingly lonely.
Yeah.
And this pandemic highlights that in ways, from nursing homes to single people to all kinds of people that I don't think that has been out of our view.
Yeah. Yes.
And I find that fascinating, that we don't seem to have a sense of how to address that. Mm-hmm. How do we cure that? You would think that would be something we could cure. Mm. And we are failing at that, because people are more and more, and the more apps and the more gadgets and the more things seems to make a greater divide between loneliness and people feeling quite lonely.
Mm-hmm. Well, so I think with this like technology, so in our culture, I think that we've kind of defined connection in certain ways, right? So there's all the social media stuff that we now have, like that's to keep us connected. When underlying it's not really the purpose of it, right? There are social connectivity aspects of it. There's money that's driving it, and there's like image, right? That is turned into like I want to present myself in this way It's certainly a way that people do share and connect, but it also is a source of anxiety. You know, I posted this and who likes it and who doesn't, or their life seems all wonderful and perfect and mine is crap. And there's a way that it doesn't nurture us. And, you know, for myself, the things, again, that have helped during this time have been around creativity, and have been my spiritual practice, which has helped me to feel not alone. And so, I mean, I readily admit, like, I'm living in a house with 3 other people, right? So I am literally physically not alone in that way. And so the pressures are really different. But I also know that in working with people about having a practice of connecting with their ancestors really through themselves, connecting with the Orisha, or their connection to God as they understand it, the practice of that brings you into contact, into relationship with them. And so in my tradition, you know, we have a relationship with our ancestors that is active, that is, you know, is different, obviously, than being physically with us. But just in the same way, we're still connected to people. We have relationships with people in this time of physical isolation and distancing. We still have these relationships. And so to connect with those, to activate those relationships in the present, has helped people, even before this happened, to not feel alone. Because they can feel and experience that relationship. And not just the I remember when, and here's this kind of old memory, but like, oh, there's something that actually is alive and present now, in working out some things and addressing. So, like, you know, this song of, you know, thank you for these things you've given to me, and I'm using these things. It's part of that relationship that connects us to our life, and with a capital L, and to these various forces that help us to really feel and understand that we're not alone. And I think that, you know, our culture is really based on this, like, no, you are alone unless you kind of do these specific things. And because we can't do now those specific things, people feel alone. Their sense of self is challenged. Our culture is based, this culture is based on our identity is our work, and our work is our identity. And so now that we can't be doing it in the same way, our actual identity is threatened. And that's not true. That is just not true. It's something we have believed, but our lives are bigger than our work. Our lives are bigger than these circumstances. And so to connect with that is actually, there's a place of ease and support, not just comfort, like a soothing thing, right? Because that's, Netflix does that. But this aspect of, oh, I can trust that I can be with myself. I can trust that I can focus on just my existence, and there is value in that. And there's a presence that I can be with and allow. That's not about what I do. That's not about what I consume. That's not about what I can buy or not buy, or if I'm with this person or that person. There's a value and a stability that's actually connected to that life, right? That's connected to, like, the trees are doing their thing, the birds are doing their thing, the earth itself is doing its thing. Impacted by human beings, right? Just like this virus is doing this thing, and is also the circumstances being impacted by human beings. That's all a part of this, like, big thing that is life. And these practices can help us to recognize, like, oh, right, I'm still here. This is still going on, and these are different. So now I need a different view. I need some flexibility to deal with these circumstances. And the flexibility is not going to come from me trying to increase the idea that I have control over things. You know, there's so many things out of our control, right?
Yeah.
In place, what's closed, what's open, who we can and can't see. But it doesn't mean that our life is out of control. And that distinction for me is super important. I mean, it's not that I don't, even for me, like, I mean, I can get really down, I can feel overwhelmed, but it's not fundamentally life that are those things. It's my experience of my life in those moments. And it takes practice to, like, shift and to be connected to something that reminds me of that, and to enable, you know, to be in it. It's like if we focus on our breath, so many traditions and so many practices, like we're breathing in the present. Thank goodness we don't have to be in control of it, because we would just pass out. Right? But it's something that we can change. And so even whether we I'm going to do this breathing technique to help reduce anxiety, or I'm just going to trust and pay attention to my breath and follow it. My body is naturally taking in what it needs and is naturally getting rid of what it doesn't. And I think particularly in this time when this virus really affects our breathing, people's breathing, to really honor that breath and to use that.
Because I have a whole team of doctors, and so I had my telehealth checkup with my cardiologist yesterday, and he was like, "Listen, this is what I need you to do. I need you to be paying attention to your breath." He's like, "I need you to do several times a day. Take deep breaths and breathe out. Breathe in and breathe out, and pay attention. Hold it, and breathe out." I said, "Dr. Goff, that sounds like a very religious practice." He's like, "Because it is."
Life.
He's like, "I need you to pay attention."
Yeah. Well, let me just share. Let me share this breathing technique. I won't do it a lot, just because in terms of time and radio what that does. But it's called 4-7-8. It's called 4-7-8 because that's the tempo and the count of the breath. So
I like that. I'm gonna write that down.
That's one. So one cycle is 4-7-8, and while you're going through that cycle, you keep the tempo the same. So you inhale for a count of 4. You hold your breath for a count of 7. You exhale for a count of 8, and then you start right over again with 4. Inhale. So you try to keep the tempo the same. So you're doing 1, 2, 3, 4. That's your inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's the hold, and then 1. Where you get, that's the same tempo. Now you might have to count a little faster. That's okay, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, right? Because I can't hold it that long. That's fine. But you keep the tempo the same.
Yes.
And one thing I'll say is very often when people think about this, they're like, how am I gonna? I'm just gonna pass out because I'm taking 4 units of oxygen in and I'm exhaling 8. I'm just gonna run out. Well, it's just a count, so it means you have to take in a lot of deep breath faster.
Yeah.
And you let it out slow. And so, what's great about this exercise is it can occupy our thinking because we have to pay attention to the count, and it affects our physiology. It's not just think differently so you're not stressed. It's this exercise changes what's coming in and out of our body so it can calm our system down. And it really brings us into the present. So it's like, in the present, if we learn how to navigate what we're experiencing, then we can be skillful at what to do instead of, I don't like what I'm feeling, so I'm going to imagine something later. Or I'm going to mask everything now because it's just uncomfortable, which then means anything we do from that place, we're really not present for. We're really not connected to what we're doing because we're actually trying to avoid what's going on. And so that's the same in our self, in our relationships, and the work that we do. And so let this time be also, as we connect with the breath, which is keeping us alive, right? Connect with the present. We can then touch upon what do I need? And maybe what I need, I have, like the fundamental things that are distressing me, the things that generate fear over and over again. Maybe I have a little bit more than I think I do. Maybe I can trust a little bit more than I think I can trust. Just like my system is like breathing in and breathing out, and I can trust that. It doesn't mean that I magically have the thing outside of me, right? I still need this. If I can't pay my rent, right? Having this breathing technique is not going to generate the money, but it might mean that I can be with that discomfort and that fear in a very different way, and actually be creative about what I need to do to address that. And that's a piece which even in this time, and especially in this time, maybe I try to hold out to people that obviously there's kind of different problems which require different solutions, or different circumstances are happening now. But the more we can be present for them, then the more creative we can be about them, and the more sustainable the solutions can be, versus like, let me just throw some duct tape on this, and then that becomes actually the ongoing solution. Oh, more duct tape, more this, more that, and then we got the bungee cord over here, versus like, oh, maybe I can actually rebuild this. And that might maybe I need to bring someone else over here to help with this and support this in a different way, instead of me thinking I got to do it all myself. Those are the same things that we've been living with, those same patterns that we've lived within this culture and this society for a long time. And that kind of, what is the silver lining of this, or what is as everything is amped up, what does it also reveal is like, oh, right, there's still some other ways of existing, living in community, living physically separate and distant while in community, is still important and has something to give us, which actually rests outside of what we have been taught of what it means to be a person, or what it means to be a good citizen, what it means to be a contributing member of society. And there might be something that's much more connected to our humanness and our beingness to bring into this, because that's also what we need for our lives. So imagine creating new networks that are based on that kind of sustainability, that kind of presence, that kind of trust and security in who we are. And like, oh, here's some places I need to like heal to be more of how I want to be. Oh, well, maybe I need to deal with that differently than just coming home and tuning out like I would normally do. Right now I can't, right? I'm at home, I can't escape myself. Oh, so maybe what would it mean to be curious about yourself? There's also some opportunity for that.
That's good. How are the classes going? How are the workshops going?
So they've shifted. It took me some time to do that virtually. So all my work is for those who can keep working, in terms of distance stuff, is through the computer. And so now we've shifted less in terms of the class format and more of like practice sessions. So we honor our ancestors, kind of doing that practice together. And then I answer questions that people have that come up in terms of doing ancestor work. And then we make offerings to an Orisha or several Orisha, kind of depending on how I'm feeling or what comes up. And then there's some questions after that. So it's a more of a spiritual practice space than the kind of class learning space, even though there's obviously learning in the practice as well. And I've shifted that to every other week instead of the once a month. So if people are interested in that, and this one is, there are some people with some history and some experience practicing this system and this religion, but there are a lot of people where this is relatively new and there's a lot of learning happening. I'm also trying to figure out how to do something that's for people who've been in this religion or in Orisha practice for some time, who are more experienced, to have some space for them also. But if people are interested, they can send me an email at Enroue, ENROUE, at healingandliberation.com. And I can put them on a mailing list, or we can have a conversation about what they're seeking, either in terms of a practice or a community, which has actually been one of the something that's been so helpful for people is even these virtual communities, seeing people practicing together, not feeling alone. Like, oh, here are other people with the same questions or trying to engage in the same way, even though they're individual practices. We're kind of playing separately together. And that's also had a really big impact on people, more so than I expected, which has been powerful, and really differently than some of the other like work that I do over screens or in meetings, right? The kind of Zoom meetings, which can be challenging because there's this new way I'm learning on like how to still be present without this feeling I have to like project into the computer all the time and like at the screen. But I can actually still be as receptive and present as I am when I'm with somebody. So these kind of practice spaces have been more of a place to kind of learn it, and for me, learning and developing that as well, so that I can be doing this work, my therapy practice and healing practices virtually in a way that's sustainable as well. Because if I don't shift, the work can be much more draining, or feel much more draining with the amount of time that's on a screen than with people.
Yeah.
And so I noticed that.
Yeah.
And
people gonna need help how to process this world now.
What's the sustainable way of doing this? It's challenging.
Yes, like we need a support group for all of us that use Zoom all the time, or for the better part of our days. This is the tool.
Right.
Wow, another good conversation in these pandemic times.
Yes, in these times. I mean, the last thing is, like, this demonstrates, I think, more than anything for me, like, oh, we really don't know what's gonna happen. We really don't have it figured out.
Right.
And how to learn to dance with that instead of like, hunker down, right, wall everything off. It's like, oh, and how, where's that teaching as well of, oh, life is still happening. If I can plug into that, then maybe I don't have to have it all figured out the way that I thought I did.
Yeah.
Which is certainly, I mean, I get faced with that all the time.
Yeah. And, I think it takes I never like to say wasted time, but, to be stuck on trying to figure it all out, you just miss so many things along the way.
Mm-hmm.
To figuring things out. Sometimes things don't get, sometimes the figuring out is the journey to figuring it out.
Right.
Sometimes that's the goal,
Yes.
So thank you, Enroue, for another enlightening conversation that I need. This gives me just what I need. And walking into my birthday,
yes.
Just the thing, 57, here I come.
Happy birthday.
Thank you very much.
I had 52. That was mine.
Oh. I remember 52.
Wasn't that long ago now.
Wasn't that long ago. But so I'm happily walking into 57, and happy celebrations to everybody at your house, your son, and all. He's such a grown, fine, handsome young man. Lord have mercy. He went from this little, and then now it's like, so your children are beautiful. So happy celebration to him. Yeah. And Mother's Day is around the corner. So.
So I'll say this last honoring thing is that, so April, we have in our house 3 birthdays in April 2nd, April 8th, the 28th, and my wife's mom's birthday is also the 28th. And so just a shout out to my wife, Tegan, for all the work that she does. And then there's also Passover. And what's wonderful, her birthday's not till November, but what's wonderful is then we have Mother's Day kind of at the end of all this. So we get to honor her for all the work that she's done and holding joy and celebration down in our family. So I'll be glad to give a little back to her this Mother's Day.
Well, happy everything.
Happy life. Life is good, right? It is.
It is.
It's not easy.
It is not. I don't think it was meant to be, but that's all right.
It ain't.
That way.
Meant or not, it ain't.
It ain't. So.
Or not, it ain't.
Thank you, Harry. I'm on my way out. So I will see you soon, Enroue.
Yeah, we'll make another time soon.
Yes, that would be nice. That would be great.
All right, be well, everybody.
Be well yourself.
Yeah.